Ever watched someone get exactly what they always wanted only to realize they couldn't survive it? I did. I didn't just watch. I handed him the mic, turned up the lights, and smiled while he melted under the heat. This isn't a story about a petty feud. It's about betrayal, humiliation, and a very specific kind of justice. And it started with a woman named Naomi and a man I used to call my best friend. My name's Stanley. 37. Quiet guy, tech brain, not exactly the life of any party. I was a senior systems architect for a mid-sized tech company in Seattle, the kind that throws buzzwords around like confetti: AI, neural nets, predictive logistics. Behind the scenes? It was me and a team of engineers translating the chaos into reality. But public credit? That always went to the face of the company, Zach Whitaker. Zach was my roommate back in college. Tall, charming, a smile that made HR nervous. He majored in communications, which is code for talks a lot but can't code a damn thing. But man, could he sell. He sold our AI project to the board, the media, the investors, and even my mom, who started calling him the impressive one. I didn't mind. Not at first. We had an understanding. I build it. He sells it. We split the wins. Right? Enter Naomi. Naomi Byrne was our new marketing director. Smart, fierce, genuinely kind in a way that caught me off guard. She and I clicked. Not the Hollywood slow-mo kind of click, more like two puzzle pieces finally realizing they'd been sitting in the same damn box all along. We started seeing each other outside work. Kept it quiet. For a while. Zach noticed. At first, he played supportive. About time, man, he'd say, grinning while sipping his artisanal espresso. But then came the subtle stuff. Scheduling meetings that kept me and Naomi apart. Making digs about office romances in front of HR. Even started suggesting in meetings that I was distracted lately. Then the audit happened. The board flagged a security inconsistency in our project code. Something that looked sloppy, dangerous. Something with my name on it. Except I never wrote that line. Turns out someone had edited the repo logs on a night I was off the grid hiking in the Cascades. But when you're the guy no one sees and the golden boy is saying, yeah, I'm worried about Stanley too, guess who the board believes? I was escorted out of the building 2 days later. Told to take a voluntary leave while they sorted things out. Naomi didn't know what to believe. Hell, I barely knew what was happening. All I knew was I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Cold. Focused. Strategic. Zach thought he'd won. Career spotlight? All his. Naomi? Confused and drifting. Me? Out. Humiliated. Blacklisted. But what Zach didn't know was that I don't get mad. I build. So I started planning. Not just to clear my name. That would be too easy. No, I wanted Zach to choke on everything he ever chased. And the best part? He'd thank me for it first. Getting fired wasn't the worst part. It was the silence. You don't realize how much of your identity is tied to your badge until the turnstile doesn't light up for you anymore. 1 week, I'm building architecture that could revolutionize supply chain logistics. The next, I'm sitting in my apartment in sweatpants at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday trying not to Google myself. Spoiler, I did. And it sucked. Zach didn't stop at sabotaging my job. He made sure to salt the earth too. Emails went out to key contacts, ones I had cultivated for years, saying I was taking time off to deal with personal issues. I even found one where he hinted that I might be struggling emotionally after a bad breakup. Subtle. And Naomi? She didn't ghost me exactly. But things changed. Her texts got shorter. Calls less frequent. When she did come over, she looked at me like someone trying to make eye contact with a crash survivor. I couldn't blame her. Zach was charming, persuasive, and had already started planting seeds that I was paranoid, unstable, maybe even a little dangerous. And let's be honest, I wasn't exactly radiating stability those days. But I didn't scream. I didn't post a Facebook rant. I didn't storm the office and throw coffee in Zach's face. I went to Montana. Not for a spiritual retreat or anything. Just to see my uncle, a rancher who lives so far off-grid he thinks slack is what happens to your pants when you lose weight. He doesn't do drama. Doesn't do excuses. What he does do is teach lessons about rebuilding fences, trust, and sometimes people. We spent a week fixing a collapsed barn roof. No Wi-Fi. Just dry air, sweat, and time to think. By the time I came back to Seattle, I had a plan. Step 1, vanish. I legally changed my name, not a full rebrand, just enough to disappear from LinkedIn searches and facial recognition APIs. Stanley Mercer became Stan Reese, independent systems consultant. I let my beard grow. Switched out the button-downs for worn hoodies. Changed the story. No one recognized the ghost of a disgraced architect. Step 2, build something better. I started a shell company. Just me, a laptop, and a P.O. box. No website, no employees. I did some consulting gigs under the radar, used the money to rent a co-working space that looked like a tech startup's broom closet. But behind the closet door, I built a second version of our original AI framework, leaner, faster, untraceable. I knew the guts of it better than anyone. After all, it was mine. And here's where it gets poetic. Zach's PR firm had just landed a major contract with an up-and-coming AI ethics think tank. They were desperate for credibility. I introduced myself under my new name as a consultant in next-gen predictive models with a focus on post-algorithmic integrity systems. I made that up on the spot, by the way. Sounded expensive. They loved it. Within 2 months, I was advising the very organization that was supposed to validate Zach's vision. They wanted him to appear on a panel. I suggested we do a podcast series instead, deep dives into the minds of visionary AI leaders. Of course, Zach agreed. He loves the sound of his own voice. He had no idea that every mic I handed him was wired with his own rope. So there we were. Zach Whitaker, the golden child of corporate PR, agreeing to a podcast series designed to celebrate the future of ethical AI. Produced by a fictional consulting firm, mine, backed by an anonymous benefactor, also me, and marketed by a media intern I paid in Amazon gift cards to make everything look very real on LinkedIn. We called it Human Signal, Voices in the Machine. Classy, right? The hook? Every episode focused on a different tech leader whose work shaped the evolving landscape of AI responsibility. Which meant Zach was about to spend 6 episodes talking about himself, his vision, and most importantly, his own history. It was a beautiful trap. Because Zach doesn't know how to shut up. Now, if you're thinking, Stanley, how's this revenge? You're giving him free PR, then my friend, you don't know how narcissists work. See, Zach thrives in ambiguity. He controls the narrative by saying just enough to look smart but never enough to be pinned down. But if you encourage him to explain himself fully, to dig into his own mythology, to repeat the lies with more detail, he builds the gallows with his own damn mouth. Each episode, I gently nudged him. Tell us more about how the AI project began. Oh, so you were the primary architect? Walk us through the code logic. Don't worry, our listeners are tech savvy. And God bless him, he tried. But every word he spoke diverged from the real history, from my logs, my documentation, my version of events. I had receipts, emails, Git history, meeting notes. I'd built it all while he was doing power poses in glass conference rooms. It was like watching a man write his own forged memoir while the real diary sat on my hard drive. But I wasn't done. While the podcast gained traction thanks to a few well-placed bots and Reddit AMAs, I reached out to a name I hadn't said in a while, Naomi Byrne. She was freelancing by then. Left the company 6 months after I did. No surprise, Zach had made her uncomfortable, too. Not harassment, not quite, just that slow, oily pressure men like him apply when they know the walls protect them. We met for coffee in Capitol Hill. Neutral ground. She looked better. Stronger. But cautious. I'm not here to make you pick sides, I said. I just want to show you something. I handed her my phone and let her listen to episode 3. The one where Zach took full credit for the AI's predictive clustering system, the one I designed from scratch during a flu-ridden week in 2020, high on NyQuil and pure spite. Her face changed around the 3-minute mark. You wrote that, she said. Quietly. He told them you just reviewed it. Yeah, I said. And that's the version everyone believes. Unless what? I leaned in. Unless the world hears the real story. With proof. With timestamps. With witnesses. But not in a rant or a Reddit thread. In a narrative. A takedown so clean he won't even see the knife. She didn't respond right away. But she didn't say no. And that's when I knew. Zach's name was about to be everywhere. Just not in the way he hoped. 3 weeks before the conference, the podcast hit critical mass. And I mean critical. Episode 5, A Reimagining Ethical Frameworks in Corporate AI, featured Zach word vomiting about responsibility while tossing around words like deep protocol integrity and synaptic learning pillars. I don't even know what that last one means. I'm pretty sure he didn't either. But people ate it up. Business blogs quoted him. TechCrunch reposted snippets. He started getting invitations, panels, keynotes, interviews. That was my cue. See, this wasn't about destroying Zach's career in private. No, that's not what people like him fear. They fear exposure. They fear the kind of embarrassment that doesn't just take away their power, it makes everyone else laugh at how little they had to begin with. Enter the Pioneer Summit, a prestigious tech conference for visionaries reshaping tomorrow. One of those events with TED Talk lighting, velvet lanyards, and overpriced smoothies. Guess who was headlining the AI panel? That's right. Zach Whittaker. Subject, the ethical imperative, AI in the age of accountability. I nearly pulled a muscle trying not to laugh when the invite went public. And because fate has a poetic streak, guess who else was invited independently, not knowing the trap I was building? Naomi Byrne. She'd been making waves as a consultant after leaving the company. Smart, driven, and now unaffiliated. The summit thought the tension of having them on the same panel would spark dynamic conversation. Dynamic conversation, huh? I had something a little louder in mind. Step 1. I forwarded all 6 episodes of the podcast to a tech journalist named Jordan Lin. She and I had crossed paths years ago when she was just a blogger covering open source drama. Now she wrote exposés on industry fraud for a major outlet. I included a simple note. This guy's about to be on stage in front of the industry. I think you'll want to ask where the bones are buried. I've attached a shovel. Jordan bit. Step 2. I opened my archive. Everything Zach thought he'd buried, I'd kept. Version histories. Authorship metadata. Slack exports. Even a draft of a message he typed but never sent where he asked someone from IT if repo logs could be edited retroactively for formatting purposes. Rookie move. They can't, and even asking is suspicious. I sent the entire archive to Jordan. Fully indexed. Color-coded. Annotated. She told me it was the most organized whistleblower drop she'd ever seen. Then she asked if she could quote me. I told her no. I wasn't the story. Zach was. 2 days before the conference, Naomi called me. He's nervous, she said. Pacing in meetings. Snapping at junior staff. He knows something's coming. I smiled. Good. Let him sweat. You still want me to go through with it? Only if you want to. You don't owe me anything, Naomi. I know, she said. But I owe him something. The night before the panel, Jordan's article dropped. The Illusionist, How a Rising Star in Tech Built a Career on Borrowed Brilliance. It blew up. The piece laid everything bare. Zach's manipulation. The forgery. The sabotage. My quiet erasure. It didn't paint me as a saint, Jordan was too good for that, but it made one thing undeniable. Zach didn't build anything. He just wore the costume. Tech Twitter went feral. LinkedIn was a funeral. Half the comments were shocked. The other half said, I always felt something was off about that guy. But the best part? The article ended with a teaser. Tomorrow, Mr. Whittaker is expected to speak on ethical responsibility in AI. We look forward to seeing whether accountability begins at home. The morning of the conference felt like a wedding and a funeral had a baby. The venue? Downtown Seattle, all glass and brushed steel, filled with industry types pretending they weren't checking Twitter every 3 minutes. I showed up early. Not as Stanley Mercer. Not even as Stan Reese. Just as a nobody in a hoodie, sipping burnt hotel coffee and watching everything unfold from the back row. Zach arrived late. Classic move. Big entrance. Except this time, the room didn't tilt toward him the way it used to. There was a shift. An edge. People smiled tighter. A few didn't smile at all. He noticed. Oh, he noticed. Naomi took her seat on the panel first. She looked calm. Measured. Deadly. She wore a black blazer and that look women get when they've stopped apologizing for being smarter than the men next to them. I felt proud. I felt dangerous by proxy. Then Zach walked on stage. Applause thin and polite. He took the center chair like he was still the man of the hour. Smiled like he hadn't been called a fraud by a major publication 12 hours earlier. The moderator, bless her ruthless heart, didn't waste time. Before we begin, Mr. Whittaker, I'd be remiss not to ask, do you have any response to last night's article in The Signal? The room held its breath. Zach did what Zach always does when cornered. He spun. I think it's unfortunate, he said, when someone with an agenda tries to weaponize past misunderstandings. Innovation is messy. Collaboration is complex. But I've always been transparent. There it was. Polished. Rehearsed. Insulting. Naomi leaned forward. I was there, you know, she said. Her voice was calm, but you could feel the blade in it. During those complex collaborations. And what I remember most was how quiet Stanley Mercer got every time Zach took credit for his work. Murmurs. Zach chuckled. The laugh of a man who's already lost the room but hasn't realized it yet. I'm sorry, Naomi. But let's not make this personal. She cut him off. You made it personal when you erased him. When you called him unstable behind closed doors. When you planted bugs in his codebase to make him look incompetent. Dead silence. Do you deny that? She asked. Zach froze. There it was. The moment. He couldn't say yes. Not with Jordan Lynn sitting in the front row, nodding slowly, notebook in hand. He couldn't say no. Not with half the panel already giving him side-eye. So he tried to pivot. I think we're here to talk about ethics, not settle old grudges. Oh, Naomi said, cool as stone. We're talking about ethics. And that's when I made my move. I activated the presentation feed. See, the tech team was using cloud slides for the panel. I'd slipped a link to an illustrative case study into the deck. And when Naomi hit the clicker, it launched a side-by-side code comparison. One version signed by me, timestamped, commented, documented, and one revised by Zach, with mismatched variables and a fraudulent log history. The crowd gasped. Oops, Naomi said. Wrong slide. The moderator smiled faintly. No worries. That was illuminating. Zach looked like someone had just swapped his LaCroix with battery acid. He left the stage early. Security escorted him out. Not because he was dangerous, but because someone whispered he might try to cause a scene. He didn't. He walked out in silence, past a hallway full of side eyes and whispered names. Fraud. Copycat. Clown. Zach didn't speak to the press that day, which was unusual for him. The man had never met a camera he didn't flirt with. But when you walk off a stage trailing the shredded threads of your own credibility, you tend to keep your mouth shut. Not that it mattered, because the internet didn't. In less than 24 hours, Zach became a cautionary tale with his own hashtag. Hashtag Whitaker Wires. There were memes, side-by-side screenshots. One of my favorites was a still of him mid-panel with the caption, "When your ego has a data breach." Even better, a TikTok of Naomi syncing the panel's audio to the Succession theme. Ruthless. Meanwhile, I kept my head down. I didn't post. I didn't tweet. I didn't tell anyone who I was. I watched from my quiet corner of Seattle as the man who once had lunch with VCs in glass towers now had his LinkedIn ratioed into oblivion. His agency dropped him first. Then his book deal. Then the ethics panel removed his name from all internal documentation, issuing a very polite but very public, "We regret the association" statement. And while Zach was doing PR triage with a paper towel and a prayer, Naomi was suddenly everywhere. Interviewed by Wired, asked to keynote at MIT, signed on as an advisor to a European AI governance initiative. She called me a week later. They offered me a signing bonus, she said, stunned, and full creative control. You deserve it, I said, and I meant it. There was a pause. You should come out of the shadows, Stanley. Let people know the truth. I considered it. But truthfully, I didn't want fame. That's his addiction, not mine. I wanted something quieter, deeper. I wanted freedom. So I took the licensing deal. The consulting firm I'd quietly built under a different name, remember, got a contract to deploy the AI framework internationally. I negotiated terms through a proxy. No one ever traced it back to me. Well, except for Naomi. She knew. We had dinner the week the deal closed. Not a date, not exactly, but it felt like something new, not haunted by the ashes of what came before. I still think you should have let me go for the throat, she said, cutting into her steak. I did, I said, sipping my wine. I just let him sharpen the knife himself. She smirked. You're scary, Stanley. I smiled. No, just thorough. As for Zach, last I heard, he was taking time to reflect in Costa Rica. That's PR speak for nobody wants to hire a walking scandal. And he's burning through what's left of his savings on wellness retreats and performative yoga. The man who once branded himself as the voice of ethical tech now sells LinkedIn courses on resilience through reinvention. It has 1.7 stars and one brutal review that simply says, "Wish I could refund my time." You ever walk past a place where you used to belong and feel nothing? It's surreal. 6 months after the conference, I found myself standing across the street from the glass fortress I once called my office. Same security guards. Same rotating door startup bros vaping outside like they're curing cancer with Juul pods. Same damn ficus in the lobby, probably fake. But for me, it was just architecture now. No heat, no sting. Just a location where a different version of Stanley Mercer died and another version was born. I was waiting for someone. Not Zach. Don't worry. His arc is over. No, I was meeting someone far more interesting. Darren, one of the senior devs who'd worked under me. One of the few who'd actually questioned the audit when it came down but got shut up by HR. He walked out looking nervous, like he was meeting Deep Throat in a parking garage. I waved him over. You sure this is okay? He asked. They don't know we're talking? They don't even know who I am anymore, I said, grinning. Legally. He laughed. Then got serious. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, he said. I knew something was off, but I didn't push. You don't owe me anything, I said. But if you want to make it right. I handed him a USB. Inside? The full architecture of the project, my version. Optimized, ethical, untraceable, open source, with one condition. Don't sell it, share it. Let the community own what Zach tried to steal. He stared at the drive like it was radioactive. You sure? I'm not going to use it, I said. I've got other things to build now. What should I say if someone asks where it came from? I shrugged. Tell them it was left behind by a ghost with good intentions. We shook hands. As he walked away, I felt something lift off my chest, like finally exhaling a breath I'd been holding since the day my badge stopped working. Later that night, I got a text from Naomi. Just read the post about your framework. It's already got 12K stars on GitHub. You sure you don't want credit? I don't need credit, I replied. I know who built it. You're going to disappear again, aren't you? Maybe, but this time on my terms. I still get updates now and then. About Darren's open source team, which is growing. About Naomi, who now sits on the Federal Ethics Board for AI deployment. And yes, occasionally about Zach. His latest LinkedIn post was a TEDx audition clip filmed in his living room. The camera angle was weird and he used the phrase post-factual innovation space twice in one sentence. The comment section was locked. I watched the first 30 seconds. Then I turned it off. Not out of mercy. Out of boredom. It's funny what people think revenge looks like. They picture rage. Explosions. The villain getting dragged away in cuffs while the hero lights a cigarette and says something cool like, justice. But that's not what it is. Not the real kind. Revenge, when it's done right, doesn't end with a bang. It ends with indifference. It ends when the person who wrecked your life fades into background noise and you finally stop flinching when their name comes up in a podcast ad. That's what this is now. Silence. Clean. Unbothered. I took the licensing money from the consulting firm and bought a house an hour outside of Seattle. Not one of those fake cabins with Wi-Fi that charges $600 a night on Airbnb. A real one. With trees. Dirt. A porch that creaks like it's proud of its age. My neighbors don't know what I used to do. Or what was done to me. They just know I fix things. Mostly code. Sometimes tractors. One guy brought over a broken drone. I didn't ask how it broke. He didn't ask about my scar. It's the kind of place where your worth is measured in whether you wave back and don't park like a jerk. Suits don't matter. Names don't echo here. Only character does. I started teaching online, low-key. Systems architecture, AI ethics, clean code principles. No face cam. No bravado. Just voice and screen. The funny thing? Most of my students know about the framework Darren posted. They just don't know I built it. And I don't need them to. Naomi visits sometimes. She still travels a lot: Brussels, DC, Singapore, wherever policy meets tech and they need someone with a brain and a conscience. She's becoming a kind of legend in her own right. Not because she chased it, but because she earned it. When she's here, we don't talk much about the past. Occasionally it comes up, like when she's had wine and the porch is dark and the stars are out. You know, she said once, you could have destroyed him more directly. I didn't want to destroy him, I said. I wanted him to self-destruct. I just cleared the safety nets. She looked at me for a long moment. You really never needed the spotlight, did you? I smiled. It burns too hot. And besides, I gestured to the trees, the silence, the dog sleeping at my feet. This is better. She didn't argue. I get emails sometimes. From people in the industry. Coders. Young engineers. Folks who read Jordan Lynn's article and figured out the breadcrumbs. They don't ask for interviews. They just say thank you. One even wrote, "Your silence was louder than his entire career." I printed that one out and stuck it to the inside of my workbench cabinet. Not to brag. Just to remember. To remind myself, you don't have to be loud to be heard. You just have to be right and patient. Came in the form of an email. No subject line. Just a name in the sender field I hadn't seen in over a year. Zach Whitaker. For a second, I stared at it like it might detonate. I was in my shop, fixing a busted chainsaw for a neighbor who swore it just stopped working. Even though it smelled like it had been dipped in barbecue sauce. Sunlight filtered through dusty windows. My dog, Scout, was snoring under the workbench. The outside world was quiet. And there it was. That name. That ghost. I didn't open it right away. I went for a walk. Chopped some firewood I didn't actually need. Took Scout to the creek and watched him try to bully a frog for 20 minutes. All the things I do when I feel that old pulse of rage start to throb in my fingertips. That quiet, patient kind of fury that doesn't boil, it curdles. When I finally sat down and clicked it open, here's what it said. Stanley, I assume you've seen what's happened. I know you were behind the article, the podcast, the conference slide. I figured it out too late. You always were better at seeing the long game. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I wouldn't forgive me either. I'm just writing. I guess because there's no one else left to write to. I've lost everything. My firm. My reputation. Naomi. I thought I could rebuild, but it's like walking around with a scarlet letter only tech people know how to read. I don't blame you. You never raised your voice. You never threw a punch. You just held up a mirror. And I hate what I saw in it. Anyway, I'm going offline for a while. No idea if this email still works by the time you read this. But I needed to say it. You won, Zach. I sat there for a while after reading it. Not satisfied. Not angry. Just quiet. It wasn't an apology. Not really. And it wasn't closure either. Closure's a myth. You just learn to live with the door half open and stop standing in front of it hoping someone locks it for you. But still, there was something in the way he said it. You never raised your voice, you just held up a mirror. That felt like the closest thing to truth he'd ever written. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't know what to say. Because I did. I could have written a dissertation. Could have told him what it felt like to be erased. What it meant to build your way out of rubble someone else made for sport. How many nights I spent convincing myself not to destroy him outright. But then I'd be inviting him back in. And the thing is, I don't live in that world anymore. I let the email sit in my inbox for a day. Then I archived it. Not deleted. Just put away. Like a trophy if trophies made you tired instead of proud. That night, Naomi texted me. Heard from him? Yeah. He wrote. Said I won. Did you? Not sure. But I didn't lose. She sent back a single word. Good. There's a myth that revenge gives you closure. That once you've outsmarted, outplayed, or outlasted the person who wrecked you, you walk away to the sound of thunderous applause and fireworks over a burning bridge. But here's the truth. There is no soundtrack. It ends quietly, with peace. And peace, it turns out, is a strange thing to get used to. Months passed after that final email. Zach's name faded from headlines, from gossip, from search results. His TEDx audition video got pulled. His podcast disappeared from streaming. He went dark, deleted his socials, became a ghost with a Google trail full of footnotes and cautionary takes. I stayed in the cabin, built bookshelves, rewired the generator, took a course in Japanese woodworking just because. Scout got older, slower, lazier like me. Naomi visited often enough that I stopped calling them visits. She left a toothbrush in the bathroom and never asked for it back. And one morning, I realized something strange. I'd stopped waiting for the next shoe to drop. No more watching my back. No more scanning inboxes for threats or articles or damage control. Just life. Quiet. Solid. Mine. I got a letter recently, handwritten, from a student at a university I'd never heard of. He'd traced the AI framework back to me using Git commits, email handles, and some smart detective work. Kid had talent. He didn't want anything. He just wanted to say thanks. Said the framework had inspired his thesis on ethical architecture as resistance. Said it gave him hope that tech didn't have to belong to narcissists with Wi-Fi and pitch decks. At the bottom, he wrote, "Some people build for attention. Others build to last. I want to be the second kind." I pinned it to my wall, next to the quote from the woman who said my silence was louder than Zach's whole career. And for the first time, I felt something close to pride. Not because I'd beaten him, because I'd outgrown him. Naomi came out to the cabin one weekend with a bottle of wine and a look on her face like she'd finally stopped running. 2. We sat on the porch, Scout between us, and watched the sky turn that kind of orange that makes you believe the world might still be good. "You ever miss it?" she asked. "The spotlight." I thought about it. The panels. The press. The people hanging on every word, even the ones that weren't mine. "No," I said. "The spotlight's heavy. I prefer the sun." She smiled. "Zach will be a footnote. A lesson. A red flag in some HR manual. But me? I'm still building. Not to prove anything. Just because that's what I do."